Today's episode, the Chicago Blackhawks stayed hot last night, defeating the Nashville Predators 2-1. I'll go over the impacts of their win in the standings, and I'll also talk about the report that Jonathan Toews is strongly considering retirement at the end of the season. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Today is Friday, March 17th. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you can also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And real quick, do me a huge favor if you haven't done so already. Make sure to go and show some support for the audio listeners. Make sure to go and follow the podcast. You can also go and leave me a review on either Apple Podcasts or on Spotify as well. And spoiler alert, you're going to need to do that anyway in order to qualify for the 2 free Blackhawks tickets that I'm giving away on the 28th against the Dallas Stars. So make sure to go do all of that for the video folks, even for the audio folks. If you're not already watching the video version of these episodes, what are you doing? Go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. While you're there, make sure to go do all that other good stuff. Smash the like button, go and comment down below, and ring that bell so that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it gets posted to YouTube each and every day. All right, enough of that good stuff. Thank you all again, as always, for tuning into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And thank you all for making the show your very first listen here to start off your day. The Chicago Blackhawks kept on rolling last night, defeating the Nashville Predators 2-1 over at Bridgestone Arena. Always feels good to pick up a victory over Nashville in their own building, although it most certainly did not help the Blackhawks in terms of the tank standings, which I'm going to get into here as always in just a moment. It's kind of the name of the game for the Blackhawks with 14 games left here in the regular season now. Yes, this did not help out the Blackhawks. We don't want them to be winning right now because of the tank standings. But I do want to remind all you fans out there that even while the point of this season was obviously to be as bad as possible, let's not beat around the bush. You can see all the moves that Kyle Davidson did in the offseason to build this NHL roster. Yeah, the purpose of doing that, the reasons he made the moves he did, was because he wanted the Blackhawks to be in a good spot heading into the 2023 NHL draft lottery. So yes, while that is the case, we do still want to be seeing signs of improvement along the way. After all, we are trying to build towards something, right? Blackhawks fans, there is an end goal that we should be keeping in mind, even though it is potentially 3, 4, 5 years down the road. We are still trying to build towards something. And even in the first year of a full-blown rebuild, you're still trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. And the Blackhawks are in the midst of one of those runs right now where they're showing us fans, hey, maybe we got some pieces here. Maybe we're onto something. And while that is hindering them having potentially the best odds of landing Connor Bedard in the 2023 NHL draft, I still think this is something that we should be happy to see, Blackhawks fans. I get the frustration. I truly do. But you got to keep the end goal in mind that we're trying to build towards something. We know it's not going to be accomplished immediately, but there's no clear-cut path of how to do that because players don't tank. It's just that simple. While the front office is tanking, Luke Richardson and the players in that locker room, I mean, we heard Luke Richardson say at the beginning of the season, he's going to try and make it hard for Kyle Davidson. And I'd say he's done a heck of a good job at doing that, while the Blackhawks, might I add, still have the third worst points percentage in the entire NHL. It's not like they've been completely thrown out of a chance at landing the number 1 pick. No, they're still, while the last couple of victories in a row here hasn't helped out their position, all things considered, they're still in a pretty good spot. And again, players do not tank. And this type of fight that we're seeing out of the Blackhawks squad, even in year one of this rebuild post-trade deadline, with the roster being far less than 100% healthy, might I add. I just went over, I believe, on the show that came out on Tuesday, all the injuries that the Blackhawks are dealing with right now. They're still finding ways to hang in there also against some other teams across the NHL right now that are playing meaningful hockey, that are in playoff races. The Ottawa Senators, heard a report yesterday on Twitter that it was just a back-breaking loss for them against the Blackhawks, and they really have not played well ever since. The Detroit Red Wings are fighting for their playoff lives right now. The Blackhawks hung in there well against them. The Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, two real close games. The Blackhawks lose in overtime to the Panthers. Then they lose in the final minute to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have, of course, made the Stanley Cup in 3 consecutive years out of the Eastern Conference. Then the Blackhawks go on to beat the Boston Bruins, the top team in the NHL. And now they've defeated the Nashville Predators most recently. 6 teams that are playing meaningful hockey right now, and the Tankathon Chicago Blackhawks have found a way to be in the game against all of them. That is meaningful, folks. It really goes to show what Luke Richardson, the buttons that he's able to press from behind the bench, and how he's able to squeeze the absolute most out of what this roster is right now. That's a good sign, Blackhawks fans. Let's not forget, while we want this team to be playing poorly, playing good hockey is a good thing. Now, maybe they shouldn't get in a habit of doing it too consistently in these final 14 games for our sake as fans, but the fact that Luke Richardson is able to do this with this kind of roster, it's undoubtedly impressive, and it has to have you thinking as a fan, well, imagine if Luke Richardson was here the past couple of years, 2 years ago when the Blackhawks traded for Marc-Andre Fleury, traded for Seth Jones, made this big scrap of the rebuild and put it all back together on the fly. If Luke Richardson was here, it makes you wonder, what could the Blackhawks have done with that roster? And on the flip side, it has to make you feel good about where the Blackhawks are heading, considering the roster should only get, well, maybe not next season, but the years following should only get better and better and better as this team continues to go through the rebuilding process. It has to make you feel good about the Blackhawks' future, considering what they have right now behind the bench in Luke Richardson. And let's not get it twisted. The players deserve a ton of credit too. I think a lot of the folks covering the Blackhawks have been, rightfully talking about the job that Luke Richardson has done. But these Blackhawks players, a lot of them, guys that haven't necessarily been full-time NHLers throughout the course of the season, but they're making an impact for the Blackhawks right now in the biggest way. And we saw it once again last night against the Nashville Predators. How about Lukas Reichel, who probably could be a full-time NHLer at this point? Yeah, I think that's fair. He's been playing some really good hockey, even though he had kind of cooled off in his past 3 games, found the back of the net, albeit due to a fortunate bounce off of a Predators defender, wound up scoring his 3rd NHL goal, still giving him 4 points in his last 8 games. Excited to see what Reichel's going to do as he continues to get a spot on the top line, and I am interested to see how long the Blackhawks are going to keep him up here in the NHL, especially when the Rockford IceHogs could kind of desperately use some help right now as they're making their push toward the Calder Cup playoffs as well. But the 2 guys I really want to talk about here for a second have been part of the phenomenal third line for the Chicago Blackhawks, which has undoubtedly been their most effective line over the past 3, 4, 5 games. And that's been the third line of Boris Katchouk, Jujhar Khaira, and Joey Anderson. Yes, you're hearing me right, Blackhawks fans. That has been the showstoppers for the Chicago Blackhawks over the past week and a half. It's been Boris Katchouk, Jujhar Khaira, and Joey Anderson, just as everyone expected. No, but in all seriousness, I can't say enough about how good of a job this third line has done for the Blackhawks. They've just absolutely wreaked havoc on each and every shift. They're forcing turnovers. They're getting in there on the forecheck. They're being physical and grindy and scrappy along the boards, and I absolutely love it. I don't know how, but this line is piecing together some consistent offense for the Blackhawks. Jujhar Khaira didn't find his way on the stat sheet last night, but he still has 5 assists over his past 5 games. Joey Anderson made a heck of a play to force a turnover and then set up Boris Katchouk for the eventual game-winning goal. Joey Anderson now has 4 points in his last 5 games. Boris Katchouk keeps on finding the back of the net, baby. He's got 5 points in his last 4 games. I don't think I ever would have imagined myself saying this, but how about Boris Katchouk? I mean, just absolutely turned it around after it really seemed like he was kind of the odd man out of this forward group, was regularly getting healthy scratched. And even when he did get an opportunity, it always felt like he made some sort of boneheaded defensive play or some sort of costly turnover. He had that stretch where he was committing obscene and ridiculous penalties. He's been vocal about how this year has been very challenging and frustrating for him. I'm sure he's riding so sky high right now, considering his play has been just dynamite, just absolutely dynamite. It's been awesome to see out of Boris Katchouk, a guy who I just mentioned on the show recently is still signed on with the Blackhawks through the end of next season. I felt like, prior to this run of his, the Blackhawks might have had their minds made up about him and might have maybe tried to move on from him in the offseason. Now, that still could be part of their plans, but this run of his that he's been on could possibly be changing their minds. Hey, why not? I'd be willing to give Boris Katchouk another look next season. It's not like he's costing a ton of money. He's been an absolute wrecking machine down there on the third line for the Blackhawks lately. And I got to talk about Joey Anderson too, a guy who was just kind of seemingly, at least to us fans, a throw-in as part of the return for Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty. But it's almost like that Kyle Davidson knows what he's doing, Blackhawks fans, because Joey Anderson, with his play recently, has some folks thinking he could be the next Sam Lafferty, the next guy that, kind of didn't fit in with his last club, but is going to get a massive opportunity here in Chicago. He's made the most of it. All of a sudden, it has you wondering, could Joey Anderson be a guy that is an impact player night in and night out for the Chicago Blackhawks like he's been these last 5 games? Could he do that over the course of an entire season? I don't want to get ahead of myself because the game of hockey is weird. Players will go on runs that'll have you changing your opinion on them in a hurry. And I don't want to get over my head on Joey Anderson. But certainly looks to be an intriguing type of player. He's still only 24 years old. He's got some size to him. He's been showing us that he can contribute on the stat sheet as well recently. Could be another guy that the Blackhawks sneakily add, and who knows, maybe he has a future here. Maybe the Blackhawks will be able to flip him in the future for more assets. I don't know. It's interesting, but either way, Joey Anderson has been playing remarkable hockey down in that third line with Boris Katchouk and Jujhar Khaira. And then I got to mention real quick here, the goaltenders. How about the goaltending for the Chicago Blackhawks? And every time they've gone on a run somewhat like this throughout the course of the season, I know those type of runs have been few and far between, but the goaltending has always been the backbone of it. And that's just kind of how it goes in hockey, because if you get good goaltending, you're going to have a chance night in and night out. It kind of reminds me early on in the season. Remember when the Blackhawks opened up the year, 4-2-0, 6-3-1 or something along those lines? What was a big factor in the team getting off to that type of start? They were getting some rock solid goaltending from Peter Mrazek and Alex Stalock. That's kind of returned over their last 6 games. They've only given up 15 goals during that stretch, and one of those was an empty netter. So the Blackhawks, Alex Stalock was awesome for them once again last night against Nashville. Was so close, just seconds away from earning his 3rd shutout of the campaign. That got broken up in the final minute by the Preds, but still another stand on your head type of performance out of Alex Stalock, in that he's been truly one of the best netminders in the entire NHL when healthy for the Blackhawks this season. Shout out to Lukas Reichel for continuing to play well up on the top line. Shout out to the entire third line of Katchouk, Anderson, and Khaira. Shout out to the Blackhawks goaltenders. That's really, those have been huge difference makers throughout the Blackhawks run here in their past 6 games. All right, there are my thoughts on the Blackhawks 2-1 victory over the Nashville Predators last night. Coming up in just a moment, I will take a look at how the Hawks back-to-back wins have impacted them in the Tankathon standings. But first, I need to talk to you all about FanDuel. The second half of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook, because if you're a new customer, you can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your bet doesn't hit. All you got to do is go and download FanDuel Sportsbook app on your phone. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. for all you Bulls fans out there, you got to check out FanDuel because right now you can bet on everything Bulls, from the money line to the point spread, point scores, and you can even bet on the threes made by DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Ayo Dosunmu. Plus, FanDuel allows you to combine your bets for a chance at a greater payout with the same game parlay feature, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss out on your chance to get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 back in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Real quick, before I go and get into segment 2, as I mentioned in the intro, I got to tell you more about how to qualify for the 2 free Blackhawks tickets that I am giving away on the 28th against the Dallas Stars. All you got to do, 3 things. First, you got to go and leave me a review on either Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Second, in that review, make sure to leave the name of your YouTube channel, because the third thing you have to do is you have to be subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And by you dropping the name of your YouTube channel in that review, that's how I'll be checking that you're subscribed to the channel. You have to do all of that in order to qualify for those 2 free tickets. So don't miss out. 2 free Blackhawks tickets for the game on the 28th against the Dallas Stars. All right, getting back into the good stuff here, Blackhawks fans. Let's take a quick look at the updated Tankathon standings across the NHL. As I mentioned, the Blackhawks have now picked up back-to-back victories. It's kind of looking like it's still a 4-horse race. In my mind, it's down to 4 teams, which are the Chicago Blackhawks, the Anaheim Ducks, the San Jose Sharks, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. But now with the Blackhawks having picked up 2 wins in a row against the Boston Bruins and the Nashville Predators, they sit in third to last place with 54 points through 68 games. That gives them a .397 points percentage. San Jose remains in second to last place with 52 points through 69 games. So 3 less points than the Blackhawks have, 2 less points, than the Blackhawks have, but they have played in 1 more game. That gives them a .377 points percentage right now. And then the Blue Jackets are still winning the race at the moment. They have 49 points, but through 48 games. That's the same amount as the Blackhawks have, 1 less than the San Jose Sharks. They have a .360 points percentage at the moment. The Anaheim Ducks, as I said, are the other team that I believe to still kind of be in the mix. The Montreal Canadiens are currently in 5th to last place, but they have 60 points earned through 69 games. So they only have 13 games left in the season, and they're 11 points clear of the Columbus Blue Jackets right now. I just think they're a little too far ahead in order to come into last place. I think there's no way that 60 points winds up being the amount of points that the last place team ends up with when it's all said and done. The Ducks, by the way, though, they have 56 points through 69 games with a .406 points percentage. And I actually do believe that the Blackhawks would jump them in the standings as well if they were to defeat the Arizona Coyotes tomorrow night at Mullet Arena. So one certainly to be keeping an eye out for, Blackhawks fans. I know it's not the most intriguing matchup, Blackhawks versus Coyotes, especially at 9:30 at night when you got March Madness and a whole heck of a lot of better other sports on at the moment, but one to at least be watching the score and getting some updates on your phone for, because yeah, this would be one that we would like the Blackhawks to lose. Ultimately, they did lose last time they faced the Arizona Coyotes, falling 4-1. So fingers crossed, maybe it can happen again. That would definitely help the Blackhawks out in terms of the standings. But regardless, folks, as I talk about every time really when I bring up the Tankathon standings, let's not forget that this does all come down to a draft lottery. So even if Columbus does finish in last place, that doesn't guarantee them anything. And now, don't get it twisted. Would I love for the Blackhawks to have the best chance at landing Connor Bedard? Yes, I think everybody does, including the Blackhawks front office. Again, that was the purpose of them building the roster they did for this season. But at the same time, at the end of the day, it does all come down to a lottery. And the Blackhawks, as I referenced, still aren't in that bad of a position. They're in third to last place. A loss to Arizona tomorrow night would have them sitting even prettier as we get into the final 14 games of the regular season for Chicago. All right, before I wrap up today's show, I do want to talk for a moment here about the report that surfaced earlier this afternoon, just a little bit ago, which came from John Dietz of the Daily Herald. And the report stated that Blackhawks captain Jonathan Toews is seriously considering retirement after the conclusion of this season. And of course, Toews hasn't played since January 28th against the Edmonton Oilers, which came prior to the NHL All-Star break. He's still dealing with post-COVID symptoms and chronic immune response syndrome. And that's, kind of just the latest word that we've gotten on Jonathan Toews. We've heard that, initially we heard that when the Blackhawks announced that Toews would not be traded at the deadline. I've talked about this a few times on the show as well. I think it was Pierre LeBrun tweeted out that the belief was that Jonathan Toews would be able to join the Blackhawks sometime in March before the end of the season. And, now that's obviously kind of arrived. And while Toews has been in the weight room, we heard that he hasn't really been progressing through his workouts. He's still kind of at the first stages of his workouts, and he hasn't been back on the ice for the Blackhawks since. And given that everything that he's had to deal with, I mean, not only just missing the entirety of a season, but to come back, go through that sluggish start that he had last year where he didn't score until the 26th game of the season, really felt like the first half he was just kind of getting his legs back under him and figuring out the speed of the game once again and kind of just getting situated. The second half of last year, he started to come around a little bit and we saw him playing some better hockey. And then this season, all things considered, Jonathan Toews was playing really well. I mean, leading the NHL at the faceoff dot, still the best in the biz at that department. His offensive numbers were coming back a little bit at the time when he at the time of the All-Star break, I should say, he was tied for the Blackhawks team lead in goals. He had been a good player for the Blackhawks and really had proven, I think, not only to himself, but also to everyone around the NHL, hey, look, I can still play this game and make a high impact on both ends of the ice. I can still get the job done. I'm still here to compete. I still mean business. And for Toews to now have this type of setback once again after that, to not be able to get back on the ice has to be so frustrating for him right now. And we all know the type of competitor that Jonathan Toews is. I mean, fiery, the guy wants to win. He's voiced his frustrations over the Blackhawks rebuild numerous times to the media. He wants to be out there and he wants to be competing. We know that to be true, but it just feels like his body isn't really giving him any options at this point. And I've kind of always brushed to the side kind of the conversations about Jonathan Toews retiring because prior to, him having to take this time away from the ice, I really thought that there was no way that the competitor inside of him was going to let him retire. But now that we hear, he hasn't been back on the ice in almost 2 months at this point. His workouts haven't really increased all that much. There hasn't been any signs of progression. This is kind of the first time where I've really thought, wow, this could be the end of the run for Jonathan Toews. And heck, it might even be the first time that he's thinking about it himself, saying, I just don't know if I have any choice right now but to step away. And it is really unfortunate that we've gotten to this point. It's not how anyone wants this whole thing to end if this does wind up being the case, but it admittedly does seem more and more likely given that, Jonathan Toews, as I just mentioned, there hasn't been any clear signs of progression. And look, too, for John Dietz to put out this type of report, I know John, he's a really nice guy. I've talked with him a couple of times. I love that he loves golf. There's no way he'd make this type of report if he didn't hear from two separate sources that this is what Jonathan Toews is strongly considering. So this is kind of, for me, the first realization that, this could be a real thing, because prior to this, I just always thought the fire that burns inside Jonathan Toews to try and go and win again felt like that was always going to trump anything. But now he just simply might not have any choice. So it's sad to hear that this has become a reality for the Blackhawks captain. I'd love for him to be able to, either way, if this is the end or if it isn't the end, I'd love for him to be able to get back on the ice for a couple more games. I know that's a little bit wishful at this point, but man, it would be awesome to be able to celebrate Jonathan Toews on the ice and have a couple more moments with him. But yeah, just another report of the era ending for the Chicago Blackhawks. It's a tough pill to swallow. We've already seen, obviously, Patrick Kane traded to the Rangers. Jonathan Toews' future hangs on the ropes right now. No one's really sure whether he's going to retire or even if he does come back to play. It doesn't sound like it's going to be in Chicago. Tough days here as Blackhawks fans as we hear that Jonathan Toews is strongly considering retirement. And with how things have been going, it doesn't seem all that unlikely at this point, folks. All right, I think that is going to wrap up Friday, March 17th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure, if you're not already, to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you get your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each and every day. All right, until next time, folks, that's going to do it here for the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.